Warm evening in downtown Arlington exuded a special kind of vibrancy. The bustling streets were alive with laughter, the clinking of glasses in cafes, and the rich aroma of freshly baked pastries blending into the night air. Under the soft glow of streetlights, people moved in and out of shops, carrying unfinished conversations and spontaneous plans. Amidst the flow, Elijah Grant, a black man with a composed demeanor, walked at an unhurried pace. He wasn't in a rush, nor did he seem tense, just a man savoring a rare moment of peace. His simple outfit, a fitted gray t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of clean sneakers, did nothing to diminish his strong presence. Slung over his shoulder was a worn but well-kept brown leather bag. Inside, along with a few personal items, was a book he had been meaning to read for a long time. For the first time in months, he finally had a chance to relax. But just as he stepped past the intersection, a sharp sound shattered his tranquility. The soft screech of tires against the pavement cut through the lively hum of the city. For a brief moment, everything seemed to pause. A police cruiser crept forward before coming to a sudden stop right in front of him. The car door swung open, and a man stepped out with deliberate intent. Officer Cardon. His piercing blue eyes swept over Elijah, not in recognition but in assessment. Not as one human acknowledging another, but as a subject under scrutiny. "Hey you!" His voice cut through the night, slicing through the laughter and chatter. Elijah stopped. He didn't flinch, nor did he look surprised. Slowly, he turned his head, his gaze locking onto the officers, a silent battle already beginning. "You seem to be in a hurry," Cardon said, his tone calculated. "Tell me, where are you headed?" The question fell like a blade. Elijah could hear the suspicion laced in every syllable. But he knew this game all too well. The officer stood there, his stance unhurried yet exuding an invisible authority, as if he was accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed. He was tall, his neatly trimmed blonde hair and sharp blue eyes cutting over Elijah from head to toe like a blade. On his chest, the nameplate caught the glow of the streetlights, the letters standing out clearly, Cardon. Elijah remained calm, his hands resting naturally at his sides, his gaze never leaving the officer. He had faced far more intense situations than this, on battlefields, in life-or-death scenarios, but he never underestimated encounters like this on his own homeland. Cardon took a step forward, his voice cold, laced with unmistakable suspicion. "Where are you rushing off to?" Elijah tilted his head slightly, his expression giving nothing away except composure. The repetition of situations like this was all too familiar. A black man walking down the street, doing nothing wrong, yet still questioned, still seen as suspicious. "To the bookstore," Elijah answered simply. Cardon crossed his arms, his lips curling into a half-smirk. "A bookstore, huh? And what about that bag? What do you have inside that you're holding onto so tightly?" The words weren't an outright accusation, but the implication was clear. A few passers-by had begun to slow their steps, their eyes quietly observing. Across the street, a woman pulled out her phone but hadn't yet lifted it to record. Elijah didn't rush to respond. He knew how to let men like Cardon expose their own bias without needing to provoke them. He merely tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk forming at the corner of his lips. "If you're suspicious, go ahead and check," he said, his voice steady, yet carrying something beneath it, something that demanded caution. The underlying challenge in Elijah's tone made Cardon pause for a fraction of a second. It seemed the officer hadn't expected this reaction. Not fear, not anger, but a quiet confidence. Cardon clenched his jaw, his hand unconsciously drifting closer to the strap of the gun at his waist. "I'm the one asking the questions here," he snapped. Elijah didn't move. His gaze didn't flinch, didn't provoke, just steady, unwavering, as if he had already foreseen every possible turn this encounter could take. The air around them grew unnaturally still. No one spoke, yet the weight of the moment pressed down heavily. The silence of the crowd was a verdict in itself, a quiet condemnation of Cardon. They had seen. They understood exactly what was happening. A light breeze swept through the street, rustling loose papers along the pavement, but the silence between Elijah and Cardon was as heavy as stone. The officer's eyes gleamed with a mixture of challenge and frustration. He was used to people bowing their heads when questioned, to fear flashing in their eyes at the sight of a badge. But Elijah was different. He didn't avert his gaze, didn't shrink away, and most importantly, he wasn't afraid. A few bystanders began slowly pulling out their phones. No one spoke, but their eyes said everything. They were watching. They were recording. Cardon noticed it too. His jaw clenched, and he took a deep breath, trying to maintain his authority. "Hand over your bag for inspection," he ordered, his voice sharp. Elijah lifted his bag slowly, his movements unhurried, calm. "Do you have a search warrant?" Cardon froze. A simple question, yet it cut through the air like a blade. Elijah knew the law, and more importantly, he knew Cardon had no legal right to search him without just cause. The tension thickened. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man shook his head, while a young woman steadily raised her phone, openly recording now. Cardon could feel the situation turning against him. He didn't want to lose control of the moment, but he also didn't want to look weak. His jaw tightened as he stared at Elijah, this black man who refused to flinch, who wasn't afraid, who had somehow managed to put him on the defensive in front of an audience. "You're obstructing police work," Cardon said, his voice forced into measured control, but the hostility in his eyes was unmistakable. Elijah smirked slightly, not a hint of fear in his expression. "Obstructing? I only asked a simple question." The words landed like a direct blow to Cardon's ego. A vein pulsed at his temple, and his grip on his holster tightened, but then, he hesitated. He could feel the weight of too many eyes locked onto him. Then, a voice called out from the crowd. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Cardon snapped his head toward the sound, but the moment had already shifted. Another voice chimed in. "He was just walking. Why are you stopping him?" The questions came like waves, crashing into the silence. This was no longer a passive crowd. They were now witnesses. They were taking a stand. Cardon knew he had lost control. Frustration burned in his chest, but he also understood. If he pushed this any further, he could be the one in trouble. He took a step back, his expression dark with barely contained rage. "You got lucky this time," he muttered through clenched teeth. Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was his victory. Cardon stepped back, but rage still boiled in his chest. He was used to controlling situations, to people bowing to his authority. But now, standing before him, Elijah remained unmoved, solid as a mountain, unwavering, unafraid. And worse, the crowd had awakened. The murmurs grew louder. A young woman raised her phone high. "We have all the evidence." Those words hit Cardon like a punch to the gut. He knew this wouldn't just go away. A viral video could ruin his career. Elijah lifted his bag with quiet confidence, his voice steady but commanding. "So, what now, officer? What's your next move?" Cardon clenched his fists. He wanted to act, to take back control, but his instincts screamed at him. One wrong move and he could lose everything. A siren wailed in the distance. A second police car pulled up. From the vehicle, a senior officer stepped out, Lieutenant Ramirez, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes. He scanned the scene, taking in the tense atmosphere. A few bystanders quickly approached him, showing him their phone screens, explaining what had happened. Cardon tried to speak first, but Ramirez held up a hand. "I'll handle this myself." His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Elijah remained calm, but there was the faintest glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, justice would be served this time. Ramirez watched a video on a witness's phone. His expression darkened as he saw Cardon's actions play out before him. Slowly, he turned to his subordinate. "Officer Cardon, return to the station with me. Now." The crowd went silent for a beat, then murmurs spread like wildfire. Some people clapped, others nodded in quiet satisfaction. Cardon stood frozen. "But, sir," he tried to protest. "Immediately!" Ramirez's voice rang with authority. There was no way out. Cardon clenched his jaw, but he had no choice. Shoulders tense, head lowered, he took slow, heavy steps toward the patrol car. For the first time, power no longer rested in his hands. Elijah took a deep breath. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Justice had spoken for itself. A man from the crowd stepped forward, placing a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "You're strong. Thank you for standing up." Elijah nodded slightly. Today, he hadn't just defended himself, he had sent a powerful message. Justice will always prevail. Cardon walked away heavily, each step weighed down by the judging eyes of the crowd. Phones remained raised, capturing every moment. This was no longer just a confrontation, it had become a public verdict. Elijah stood still, watching in silence. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He was simply waiting to see if justice would truly be served. Lieutenant Ramirez turned to face the crowd, his voice strong, each word deliberate. "We will investigate Officer Cardon's actions. Thank you all for your cooperation." Some people nodded in approval, but murmurs of doubt rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man shouted, "We've seen enough. What's there to investigate?" He abused his power right in front of everyone. Shouts of agreement echoed, but Elijah raised a hand, signaling for calm. He didn't want anger to turn into chaos. "Lieutenant Ramirez," Elijah spoke, his voice steady but firm. "I want to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. Too many times, things like this have been ignored." Ramirez met Elijah's gaze. He didn't look away, didn't deflect. A moment of silence passed before he gave a single nod. "I promise this will be taken seriously." Cardon's stomach twisted at those words. This time, there was no escaping it. A second police car arrived, and 2 officers stepped out. They approached Cardon, not as colleagues, but as enforcers escorting someone who had crossed the line. The crowd erupted. "He should be suspended," someone yelled. "Justice for all of us," another voice followed. Elijah remained quiet, his grip tightening slightly around his bag. There was nothing more he needed to say. Cardon was taken away. This time, he was the one being watched, judged. The phones kept recording, but now it wasn't Elijah under scrutiny, it was the entire system. As the crowd slowly dispersed, a young woman stepped up to Elijah. "You changed everything." "Thank you." Elijah smiled faintly. "No. We changed everything." Night had fallen over downtown Arlington, but the air still carried the tension of the earlier confrontation. The crowd had begun to disperse, yet the echoes of what had just transpired lingered. Elijah stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath. He wasn't the only one who had just been tested, the entire community had. Officer Cardon was escorted into the police car. His face was rigid, but in his eyes was something new, confusion, fear. Not fear of being arrested, but of knowing that the world had just witnessed the collapse of the power he had once abused. There was no hiding from the truth now. Ramirez stepped closer to Elijah, his movements deliberate. "I can't change what happened," he said, his voice steady, "but I can make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." Elijah met his gaze, searching for sincerity, and found it. "Then prove it." Ramirez gave a firm nod before turning away, signaling to the other officers to clear the scene. A middle-aged man, likely a local resident, approached Elijah, his face still carrying traces of anger. "You did the right thing," he said, glancing at the phones still recording. "We need more people like you." Elijah gave a small smile, but his eyes were unwavering. "We need more people willing to stand up." A local reporter pushed through the remaining onlookers, microphone in hand. "Do you have any message for the community?" Elijah turned to the camera. He didn't need time to think. "Remember this. Justice is not a privilege, it's a right. And if we don't demand it, it will never be given to us." Applause broke out around him, and a few voices rose in unison, chanting, "Justice." Elijah glanced at his watch. He had only planned to stop by the bookstore, yet he had walked into an unexpected battle. But he had no regrets. As he walked away, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Not because he had won a confrontation, but because he had planted a seed, a spark of awareness in the heart of the community. And sometimes, a single moment like this was enough to change an entire system.